Hi, I'm Jessica Spitz. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Columbia Daily Spectator.
And I'm Aaron, I'm the managing editor.
So we're just going to talk a little bit about some of the stories we've done recently and kind of our general coverage of Columbia's expansion into Manhattanville. So Columbia is building this new campus about 10 blocks up from where the main Columbia campus is. It's actually kind of similar to Harvard's expansion into Alston. Gotten to talk to some of the reporters about that at the Crimson this weekend, which has been really interesting. So kind of in terms of this coverage, we're looking at what's the effect on the community, how has Columbia kind of bargained with the community in Harlem in the last, 10 years since this project has really taken off, what are the priorities of the university and kind of especially our President Lee Bollinger in, expanding the campus in this way, why is it necessary, and also kind of how do undergrads, as we're an undergraduate paper, fit into all this? How does the arts and sciences at Columbia fit into all this? So Aaron's going to start talking a little bit about some of that reporting, and we'll go from there.
So like Jessica mentioned, Columbia is expanding into West Harlem. For basically all of its existence, the university has had a really sort of tenuous relationship with the Harlem community in that it's a very sort of like low-income community that doesn't get a lot of the profits that Columbia is bringing into itself. As like a multi-billion-dollar institution, and with this new campus, which Columbia was granted via eminent domain by the state, a lot of residents have always sort of been grumbling about the fact that property values are rising, that businesses are being displaced, and that just generally the neighborhood is changing a lot due to Columbia's expansion here. So that's just sort of like background. This has always been something that we've been aware of as an issue, but for a long time we didn't really have any sort of like tangible way to show that. We hadn't done a lot of reporting up until this past year on like Columbia's like actual tangible impacts on the community. So also as background, so when they got eminent domain from the state, part of the agreement was that Columbia's expansion into West Harlem would be for the greater good of the community, that Columbia would enrich local business and actively give back to people who have been living there for decades. And on Columbia's end, that meant that they agreed to invest tens of millions of dollars into affordable housing funds for West Harlem, so that as like property values rise throughout the city, Columbia would help sort of offset the displacement of people in Harlem. They also agreed to enter a partnership with a public school in Harlem and provide sort of like university resources with this like charter public school. And this was through this big agreement called the Community Benefits Agreement that was signed like 10 years ago. So the Community Benefits Agreement is actually like done through a three-party system. It's Columbia, it's the community board, and that means that it's also sort of overseen by the city. So one big challenge that we face reporting on Columbia as a private institution is that they're not really obligated to disclose anything by law about their own finances. However, because this is overseen by the city, it's all sort of like public information, which means that it is subject to FOIA. So we through a lot of PR requests to city agencies as well as FOIA requests, we were able to sort of look through all of the like proposals and all of the records of Columbia trying to actually, or this community board trying to access the money that Columbia promised. And we found that Columbia was not actually upholding their end of this community benefits agreement in practice. So one big pillar of this was the story that you see on the left. Columbia has had this agreement that they would put $10 million in escrow, and that $10 million would be invested into a fund to buy property that would become like affordable housing in West Harlem. But we found that the board that was overseeing this $10 million fund had put two requests to buy property essentially in the past 10 years, and both of those requests had sort of just died. So we actually, once we found that out, we approached the chair of this community board, and he revealed to us that only $100,000 of the $10 million had actually been spent. That's like 1% of this allocation. The rest had just been sitting around for a decade doing absolutely nothing. And the reason that that's sort of an issue, just like beyond the fact that no money is being spent to help the people in this community, is that property values are rising so quickly in West Harlem that the longer that money doesn't go spent, the less use value it actually has. And then the story on the right here, is about the school that Columbia partnered with. So this is like, generally when you talk to anyone at the school, it's like a huge success story, but the funding for Columbia that Columbia was providing had an end date that Columbia wouldn't disclose to us. This also came in partnership with the fact that predatory landlords in West Harlem were like actively forcing people out of their homes. So a sort of separate enterprise that we embarked on was tracking all of the code violations in housing around the Columbia area. This is not something, obviously, that the university itself was doing, but it sort of illustrated the extent to which it was just becoming more and more difficult to be someone living in any of these sort of like tenant housing or just like general apartment housing in the area.
Yeah. So going forward with our coverage, we definitely want to kind of keep being a watchdog in this way, holding Columbia accountable to their impact on Harlem and the residents in the community. But another kind of big way we see our responsibility is, the new Manhattanville campus is, a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. So how do undergrads, as an undergraduate paper, how do we advocate for our own interests? So the two of the buildings that have been completed so far are the new Mind, Brain, and Behavior Institute, which is a neuroscience research center, and then also a new building for the School of the Arts. And so we kind of did 2 investigations into one, what are the research opportunities for undergraduates at this, neuroscience center that's really poised to be one of the best places to research neuroscience in the world. And also about this new Lenfest Center for the Arts, how does it kind of fit or not fit the needs of actually people studying the arts already at the Morningside campus? So it's been really interesting for us to kind of see the integration of city and campus coverage about, this new campus, how do we fit in, and we're really excited kind of going forward. But that's really it. So thank you.